A doorway. One step in, and a spotlight slams down on you. Every head turns. There's a coffee stain on your shirt, tiny, and right now it looks the size of a billboard. Your cheeks are hot. You want to disappear. You know this doorway. Maybe it's a party, and you hover just outside it, scanning to see who's looking before you commit to walking in. Maybe it's a meeting, where you said one slightly clumsy thing 3 hours ago, and you're still replaying it on a loop while everyone else has forgotten it completely. Maybe it's your phone, thumb hovering over a message or a photo you want to send, already imagining exactly how each person will react. It's the same feeling every time, a certainty deep in your gut that you are being watched, that your outfit, your words, that small mistake, all of it is being seen and weighed and remembered by the people around you. Think of it as a follow spot, the kind that trails a performer across a stage, except this one is invisible to everyone but you, and it drags along the floor wherever you go, pinning you the moment you step into a room. Here's the strange part. Two strange parts, actually. First, being ignored, being left out, it hurts. Not in a vague, poetic way. It stings like something real happened to you. And second, even when you tell yourself the feeling is ridiculous, even when you know nobody is really staring at your coffee stain, that knowledge doesn't switch the feeling off. It just keeps running. Hold on to both of those. They're the whole mystery. Because to understand the spotlight, we have to do something to that room first. We have to turn the camera around. So let's rise up above the coffee shop and look down. Watch what happens to that single harsh beam on you. It softens, and then, one by one, a dozen new beams bloom across the room. One over the person by the window, hunched over their phone, dreading a text they have to send. One over the man at the counter, who spotted a stain on his own shirt this morning and has been thinking about it ever since. One over the woman in the corner, replaying her own clumsy sentence from her own meeting. Every single person down there has their own spotlight, their own floating cloud of worries. And here's the thing that flips the whole room inside out. Not one of those beams is pointed at you. They're all facing inward. Every person you were terrified was watching you is at this exact moment starring in their own private movie, convinced that they're the one under the light. The audience you feared is real. They're just all trapped in the identical illusion, and every one of them has their back to you. Attention, it turns out, is a scarce resource, and people spend almost all of it on themselves. And here's a promise for later. In a few minutes, I'm going to show you a whole room full of strangers completely fail to remember your single worst, most cringe-worthy moment within minutes of it happening. But first, we need proof, because a nice metaphor about spotlights is easy to wave away. So does this actually hold up? It does. Psychologists call it the spotlight effect, and one of the cleanest tests came out of Cornell around the year 2000. Researchers took students and made them put on a T-shirt they'd find deeply embarrassing, a big, goofy novelty shirt, and walk into a room full of other people. Then they asked the wearer to guess. How many of you do you think noticed the shirt? On average, the wearers guessed about half the room, around 46%. The reality? Only about 23% actually clocked it, roughly half. Which means you walk around feeling about twice as visible as you really are, like you've turned your own volume up to 100, while everyone else is hearing you at 50. Now here's the twist that proves this isn't just nerves. The researchers ran it the other way. They had people watch someone else wearing the shirt, and then guess how many noticed. And those estimates? Almost exactly right. Around a quarter. Bang on. So the distortion isn't about how memorable the shirt is. It's about who's wearing it. It's a funhouse mirror that only warps your own reflection. Point it at a stranger, and it goes flat and honest. You are wildly accurate about everyone in the world except one person. Yourself. Okay, So the watching is mostly in your head. But that leaves the harder question, the one that's been sitting on the shelf. If nobody's really looking, why does being left out hurt so much? Why does it feel less like a mild worry and more like an actual injury? Because, in your brain, it kind of is one. When researchers scanned people's brains during social rejection, they found something odd. The regions that lit up, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, and a spot called the anterior insula, overlap with the circuitry your brain uses for physical pain. The wiring isn't separate. It runs through some of the same alarm system. There was one study where volunteers played a simple online ball-tossing game, thinking they were playing with real people. Then the game was rigged. The others just stopped throwing them the ball, left them out, and on the scans, that pain-linked region lit up, more strongly the more excluded people said they felt. Being ignored in a pointless computer game registered in the brain a little like getting hurt. I should be careful here, because scientists still argue about exactly what that signal means. Some think it reflects pain specifically. Others think it's a more general, this matters, pay attention alarm. But the overlap is real, and it points to something important, which is this. For your ancestors, being cast out was not a bruised ego. It was a death sentence. Picture a small band, maybe 25 people, at most around 50. Fewer adults than a single classroom. Out there, alone, you couldn't hunt enough, couldn't stay warm, couldn't survive the winter. So evolution did something clever and brutal. It wired social rejection to hurt, so you'd feel it coming and never let it happen. That's why just get over it has never worked on anyone. You're not being weak. You're running a survival feature that's millions of years old, and it's doing exactly what it was built to do. The trouble is where it's doing it. Because that alarm was calibrated for a tiny world, there's a much argued about figure, Dunbar's number, that puts the ceiling of stable relationships a human brain can really track at around 150 people. Treat that as a rough order of magnitude, not a hard law, because researchers put the real range anywhere from a few dozen to a couple hundred. But whatever the exact number, it's small. About the size of a wedding. That was your whole world. Those were all the people whose opinion could ever actually shape your survival. Now look at your week. You pass thousands of strangers. You're visible, online, to many, many more. And essentially, none of them can exile you. None can starve you. None can leave you out in the snow. They can't touch your survival at all. Picture yourself standing on a tiny, glowing island of about 150 familiar faces. The people who really know you. And all around that island, stretching into the dark, an ocean of millions of faceless strangers. And here's the key. Not one of them can reach you. They can't vote. They can't decide anything about your life. But your alarm doesn't know that. It's a smoke detector wired for a house fire, and it's shrieking at full volume because you made a piece of toast. That's what fear of judgment actually is. Not vanity, not brokenness. It's old software, running on a planet it was never coded for, which reframes everything. Stop caring what people think was never a scolding. It's a diagnosis. Your hardware is fine, it's just running an outdated program. Now, this is exactly where people take a wrong turn. They hear, the audience isn't real, and they decide the solution is to become bulletproof, to not care, loudly. Picture someone showing up to a party in spiky black armor and sunglasses indoors, arms crossed, sneering at everyone, radiating, I don't need any of you, and standing completely alone, quietly miserable. Here's the problem. That's not freedom. That's the same alarm, just wired backwards. If you're building a fortress and performing your indifference, you're still being controlled by other people's judgment. You've just changed which way you're running from it. And it's worth knowing the fear isn't only about insults. There's a real thing called fear of positive evaluation, where even praise feels threatening, because standing out at all draws the group's eye. So the goal was never to feel nothing. This isn't an on-off switch. It's a dimmer. Most people live somewhere in the warm middle, wanting to be liked, which is perfectly healthy, and only at the far, blinding end does it tip into something clinical. You're not aiming for 0, you're aiming for the right setting. The ancient Stoics had a version of this. Their advice was basically, other people's opinions aren't up to you, so decide, by force of will, not to be disturbed by them. And that's genuinely useful. But here's where the modern picture pushes further. Willpower alone tends to lose against a pain-wired instinct. You can reason with the smoke detector all you like. It keeps screaming. You don't usually think your way out of this one. You act your way out. And in a moment, I'll show you exactly what that looks like. Spotlight still on, sweat still on your brow. But before the acting, 2 tools to shrink the thing down to size. The first, audit the audience. When you feel the spiral starting, stop and ask one question. Whose opinion here can actually change my life? Picture that imagined courtroom, packed with thousands of judgmental faces. Now take a red marker and start crossing them out. The strangers on the street, gone, you'll never see them again. The people online you'll never meet, gone. Keep crossing until you're left with maybe 2 or 3. The people you really respect, whose feedback actually helps you grow. That's your real jury. Maybe 5 people, tops. You have a finite amount of social worry to spend. So spend it there, on the handful who matter, instead of on a jury of millions who can't even cast a vote. The second tool, the nobody remembers test. Try, right now, to recall a specific embarrassing thing a stranger did in front of you last week. Someone who tripped, or misspoke, or had spinach in their teeth. You can't, can you? Not because it didn't happen, but because you weren't watching. You were busy in your own spotlight. And that's the whole point. Your gaffes evaporate from other people's minds exactly that fast, roughly minutes, at most a day, before their own worries wash over the top of yours. Your worst moment is a footprint on a beach at low tide, and the next wave of their own life erases it completely. So, knowing all this, feeling lighter, does the fear just switch off now? No. And this is the last piece, the one the whole thing has been building toward. Watch the character raise a hand in a meeting to ask the question they were sure would sound stupid. The spotlight is still on. Dimmer, but on. There's sweat on their brow, their heart's going. And they do it anyway. They ask the question. And the room barely reacts. Someone nods. The meeting moves on. That's it. That's the whole catastrophe. Here's why that matters so much. Understanding the bias intellectually was never going to quiet the alarm. That's why simply knowing all of this doesn't make the fear disappear. The alarm doesn't recalibrate through insight. It recalibrates through evidence. You do the scary thing, and you collect proof that the exile never comes. You speak up, and no one banishes you. You wear the outfit, you post the thing, you walk in through the doorway, and the disaster your ancient wiring predicted just doesn't happen. Do that enough times, and slowly the alarm turns itself down. Not because you argued with it, but because you showed it, over and over, that the fire it was screaming about was only ever toast. So you treat the fear as noise to move through, not a command to obey. The behavior leads, the feeling follows. Which brings us back to the doorway. Same coffee shop, same warm light, same coffee stain on the same shirt. You step in, and out of pure habit, the spotlight flickers on. For half a second, it's there, and then you just shrug and let it fade. You're not colder now. You're not armored up, sneering at the room. The place is still warm, still full of people you might like. You just aren't performing for them anymore, because you finally understand the audience was never watching in the first place. That's what this actually is. Not going hard, not caring, just reaching over and turning a Stone Age alarm back down to its correct volume, so that for the first time, you can walk through the room, instead of standing in the doorway watching yourself be watched.